lounging, son.
All right, welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name's Ryan, and once again, I have another awesome chat for you guys to check out. I'm talking to Jim and Kevin, two guys who are working on a project that is very near and dear to, I'm sure, a lot of people, and I'm sure to you guys as well, or you wouldn't be doing it. You guys are doing a Mike Mignola documentary on Kickstarter. The minute, I was just telling Kevin before we do, the minute that David sent that email, that press release to me, I emailed him right back and I said, I want to do an interview. So thank you guys for doing this. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, so first off, I already said what you guys are working on, but I want to hear a little bit of the backstory on why you guys decided to do this awesome thing.
Well, so this actually started over lunch. Like, Kevin and I have known each other for actually a couple of decades now, and we've always found different ways to collaborate on projects, and a lot of them, to be honest, have just never worked their way all the way to fruition. You know, it's like, hey, we have this idea, or we have this thought, or and a lot of it had to do with, like, and speaking of like not throwing shade, just like it was always someone else involved, and because of that, we weren't able to like execute the thing that we wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So eventually we're like, wait, if the common denominator of the people who are getting the work done are Jim and Kevin, why don't Jim and Kevin work together and see if they can't figure this shit out? Excuse my language.
Oh, hey, I cuss up a storm on this channel, so you don't need to worry about the
language. Sometimes like it's kind of natural to me to cuss, and then I'm like, wait a minute, maybe not appropriate to every audience.
Oh no, I mean, I just think they're sentence enhancers, so I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Otherwise, it'd be a very interesting conversation for us to talk about Hellboy.
Yeah.
I don't know how far we'd be able to get.
HE double hockey sticks boy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's how so this was sort of like kind of like the latest thing that we were talking about, and it was a couple of years ago, and we're having burgers and we're just chatting about stuff, and we talked about how, having been in the industry for so long, that we knew all these stories, these interesting stories from the creators of what have become these massive pop culture juggernauts. And we're like, you never really hear the cool stories from the people who made the characters. You're always just seeing sort of like, let's call it the end result. Like, you know, there's a reason that people love cooking shows, is they don't want to just see the cake at the end. They're really interested to see how that cake was made. And so this is sort of our like making the cake documentary. We're like, who do we want to talk about that is such a interesting person, an interesting personality? And that's how we rolled directly into Mike Mignola.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome, dude. I mean, he's been eluding me since I started my website. Somebody that I have probably bugged David, and I just pretend like I've never asked him, but I ask him like probably once every 6 months. I was like, so can I get an interview with him? He's not really doing interviews right now. Okay, now I'll wait another 6 months, and I just keep hitting him up. So I won't give up until somebody tells me, do not ask me again. That's when I'll stop, because if I stopped every time somebody told me no, I probably wouldn't have gotten some of the interviews that I've gotten, you know? So, but I love Mignola. I'm so glad you guys are doing this.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a no-brainer, because we're like, man, comic book creators are amazing, and their stories are interesting. And, you know, we talk about cooking shows. We talk about like the behind music documentaries about like, who was this musician and when they came up with that song. And we're like, man, comic book people are cooler. I mean, they're doing all of it. They're writing, they're drawing, and it's like a challenging career for them. And so we were like, let's just do this. I do film and video stuff, and Jim is a comic book master doing all things comic books, and we know the stories, and we're excited about this space. We're like, let's just do it. Let's do it ourselves. And as soon as we decided that, we're like, who first? We're like, Mignola, you know, like let's, and I think that also just shows Jim's level of like industry gravitas. You know, he's the guy who did Emerald City Comic Con and Lightbox and a bunch of other cool projects. because of that, that's why awesome people like Mike said yes to this project, because they know Jim and trust him, and because he makes cool stuff. So
Emerald City Comic Con is one that that's like one of the cons I've wanted to go to the most. I mean, I'm out in LA, so I get out there, but that is one of the cons that I have heard nothing but awesome things about. So thank
That's very nice.
the world. Hopefully cons come back soon, because that's definitely something I miss. And I think that's why this project, I think, is even more special right now, because we can't go to creators. We can't see them at cons. Like certain creators you can only see in certain areas of the country even, so I think that's awesome that you guys are shining a light on comic book creators, because especially, like I said, Mignola doesn't do a lot of interviews. So really what I've gotten from him is some stuff written, or the stuff that's on like the DVDs for the movies, right? Like the bonus features. You guys said you decided on him. Were there any other creators you were thinking about that you may still want to do in the future, depending on the success of this, which has already been insane?
Yes, no more questions.
Kevin's right though. Yes, like we are. So part of it's weird. I'm like gonna like give you a non-answer, because we're in a space where I think, and I hate to even say it, but in a certain point where it's like, if you put the idea out there, there are other people who are like, oh yeah, you know what? I've never thought about doing that. And they might have their own relationships and their own thing. So as a broad strokes, I will say that yes, there's definitely other creators. We have a list. This to us is actually just the first of what we're hoping to be a series of projects, because we do want to shine the light on a number of creators who we think have been kind of underserved in terms of having a spotlight shined on them and their work.
Yeah, I mean, these characters that we love, the ones from decades of comic books and movies and toys and costumes, they weren't made by committees. They weren't made by corporations. They were made by like punk rock artists who were often couch surfing for decades, trying to get their characters out there and that sort of stuff. So we definitely have more stories to tell with our favorite creators.
So what was your Jim, you said like you had a relationship with Mike prior to this. Kevin, were you always a fan of his work as well? I mean, I see the Right Hand of Doom on your shelf over there.
Yes.
Assuming you're a fan.
I'm a massive fan. I bought the first issue of Hellboy. It was one of like, I am of the age that when the Legend imprint hit in the mid 90s, that's where my brain just started exploding. And I was like, I want comics forever. Comics are the thing. And I was aware of his work before. I had seen it before, but I think it was literally just the first issue of Hellboy. He'd been around for 15 years before that, but it was that first issue of Hellboy where everything was converging for me and me seeing it for the first time. And I was younger, so it was like a little bit scary, it was a little bit edgy, but it was so well crafted and so powerful. Mm-hmm. And of course, I think before that, my brain was just equating like the artists who draw more detail or photorealistic or just tons of hatch lines, that more lines meant better. And I think with his like super minimal, super graphic style, I started to understand composition and storytelling and like pacing and silence in ways that I hadn't before. And, that really influenced me as an animator, as a filmmaker, and, kind of changed the way I saw art, not to be too grandiose about it, but like kind of changed the way I saw art.
I mean, there's no one like him. I don't think anybody you could try to emulate him, but it's never going to capture the magic that he has when he puts pencil to page. I mean, his use of shadows, the quiet moments where there is no dialogue, because he is the writer and artist. So you're seeing these images and he's striking like almost as if I've described it often as like they're etched in stone, almost like you're looking at old like manuscripts or something, or like I don't want to say cave drawings, because that's like minimizing the talent, but you know what I mean? Like almost like these things are like just from a long time ago, but also they feel so new at the same time.
It has that like primal power of those like ancient things. So it feels like I mean, he almost feels like an artist from an alternate reality, where it's like as art advanced, you know, people went left and he just did his own thing.
And that's why people love him. That's why he has the fan base that he has. That's why if anything that he puts a book out, like his whole like universe of characters, I just buy it. I don't really pay attention to solicits. There's only a few creators I do that with. Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips are a creative team that I will. You could just say they have a new book out. I'll order it blindly. You know, Mignola is the same exact way for me. I want to know how. I mean, you guys decided you were going to do this. How did it go from your decision to do it, and then you brought it to Mike, and how did that all come about? And when did you guys first start doing this? Because I think it said like it's been a couple of years in the works.
Yeah. So after we had our first sit down, you know, like our kind of like revelatory moment of saying, hey, you know what, we should do this. Then it was a series of back and forths where we're like, okay, so who, again, you know, once we decided it was, who do we want to do? Okay, we want to do Mike. All right. So how's that going to work? Like we literally were just like, okay, so what does that actually mean? It's like, well, Mike lives in LA. So how does that translate to us talking to him? Like, okay, we need to go to LA, obviously. Mm-hmm. What does that look like? You know, because we're also like doing this out of our own pocket. And so we're like, okay, well, we can't afford to fly down like a crew. So, you know, what are we going to do? All right, well, we know someone locally. Let's bring them down. Let's see if there's talent that we know down in LA, which was something that Kevin was really invaluable with because he's been in the film industry for a while and has worked with people. And thus we were able to call on some people in LA. So what this ended up being was an email, like an email that I'll be honest, like I agonized over probably too much to just be like, hi, Mike. like, you know me. So I've known Mike for also, I mean, I would say at least 15 years. He was a guest multiple times at Emerald City. And more recently, I run a show in Pasadena called Lightbox Expo. And he was a guest there as well. And so we have a good relationship. I know Christine, his wife, as well. And I just reached out to him and was like, listen, we're working on a documentary. Or sorry, we'd like to do a documentary. We want it to be about you. I hope you know that like I will do everything in my power to make sure that it's respectful, that it's interesting, and that it's about you, not about the movies, the toys, the video games, you name it. I'm like, I want to create a documentary that is respectful and interesting and about comics and about comics creators, because that's what Kevin and I, like, our main focus want. That's what we want.
Yeah.
And Mike was receptive. He told me later, he's like, I don't know that it would be like if it was someone else, he's like, I'm not sure I would have said yes, but like I trust that, you know, everything you do, you care about enough to make it something of quality. And I think especially after we went to his house and had a great interview and a sit down and we're able to film some other people and we cut like a little mini trailer and got it back to him, he, I think, felt even more comfortable to be like, okay, you're doing something that is exactly what you said it would be, which is it's going to be about me and my legacy, not just, hey, isn't it cool that they made a movie out of Hellboy?
Yeah, too often when they do stories about comic creators in general, it's usually like, hey, isn't it neat that this other stuff that's important is happening? And for us, we're like, no, it's the everything flows down from the comics, the stuff that was originally created, you know? And so like, that was just been our focus. Was, I don't know if you saw the trailer, but we're like, yes, it's all these cool things. It's movies, it's toys, it's board games, it's beer. But that all came from Mike, and that all came from his drawings, that came from his writing, and that came from just a comic book. And that's the stories that we're trying to tell. Is like, how did Mike come up with the characters, and what was his journey, what was his personal journey to that, and then of course addressing all the different awesome parts of his career. And you know, we do talk about things like the movies and the fandoms and the cosplayers, but all in service of Mike's journey.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't watch the trailer because I'm the type of person that tries not to ruin anything. I backed it, you know, like I don't like. I'd rather just get it like on my doorstep when it is done and watch it the way it is, and be completely 100% surprised. I don't need to know anything other than you. It's a documentary about one of my favorite creators in comics, so that's all I needed to know. You know, it's funny that like you guys are doing this, right? And I'm reading a book about Stan Lee right now that just came out, and it's. I wish, as I'm reading it, I'm in the era of like with Jack Kirby, and I know that Jack Kirby, there are interviews with him, but you know, like that we never really got to know the man really as much as I think what you guys are doing for Mike, we're gonna, you know, and I think that it is important that people don't just ask the questions. Oh, so how was it creating that character? Oh, what was it like having a movie? You know, like I like to get to know the person on a more intimate level and to really understand their motivations and their inspirations of why they do what they do. Because comic books are a labor of love. Nobody gets into comics thinking they're going to be a fucking millionaire. That's just the bottom line. You know what I mean? I mean, Jack Kirby even said it. Comics will break your heart. You know, like that's something that's often quoted, right? So I think that, you know, every once in a while we get somebody that has a like Walking Dead or Hellboy, or that's like the modern things that I can think about. But yeah, I think it's really what you guys are doing, the work you're doing is really awesome. And I'm surprised nobody's thought to do this. Frankly, you know, like it's really cool.
Thanks. I feel like it takes a certain Kevin and I say this a lot, and I say it not because I try to be self-deprecating, but like we're not like anybody special, but it takes this like specific combination of like someone who makes films, someone who loves comics, someone who cares about creators, someone who wants to tell their stories. And when you mash that together, that's where Kevin and I are. All those ingredients, and unless you have those ingredients from the person or people, then it's not like this idea is revelatory, but it's something that no one's done because I don't think people have sat down at the same way to say, this is the story I want to tell, this is what I'm interested in doing.
Also, like, I mean, I know I said I don't want to get spoiled too much, but I was wondering if you could kind of share stuff that we can expect with the documentary that maybe you guys have kind of talked about, but maybe not fully elaborated on.
Sure. You know, and try to avoid spoilers because there's a lot of really cool spoilers because it is a story, you know, like Mike's story of how Hellboy came about and how he built the Mignola verse is not just like, I became a professional artist and then I drew it and it was great. It is a quest like any other hero's journey story. But it's pretty fantastic. So, you know, we talk about Mike's life and we kind of go through his growing up and the you know, the challenges that a young person goes through and how it like was ignited. His passions were ignited initially by Dracula. And he just was this kid who liked monsters and he just wanted to like monsters. And one of the things he told us is like too often when people get in comics, they think it's a stepping stone for like movies or television shows. And they do a comic as like as a pitch for something else. And he said, all I wanted to do was draw monsters. Hence the name of the documentary, which is Drawing Monsters. And, you know, and I think that just encapsulates him as a person and kind of his journey. But, you know, from that, we also were talking to all the people, and part of the stories that we uncovered was he's not just a great writer and great artist. He has touched so many careers and so many people and helped them get into their industries, whether they're, you know, novelists or animators or directors. there's just been a massive amount of influence. So, you know, we're not just interviewing people going, Mike's great. We're interviewing people like Rebecca Sugar. And, you know, she shared with us that Mike actually advised her a lot on Steven Universe and helped her kind of come up with a lot of the stories or a lot of the iconography behind it. So like Steven Universe's star was directly based on a conversation that Rebecca had with Mike and stuff like that. And there's been, I mean, there's a lot of people that we've talked to have told these very like moving stories about how Mike has influenced them.
So your perception, well, Jim, you've known him for a long time. I don't know, Kevin, if you met him more, was it for this documentary? Is that when you first met him?
So I was doing some stuff at the Sci-Fi Channel, and I think I'd met him as a fan. Oh, no, we had a signing together in 2008, and we barely spoke, but he was very nice and cordial at the end. I had talked to him briefly when I was doing work for Sci-Fi Channel because I was working on the Krypton show. And, you know, Krypton, the TV series, was based on a graphic novel by John Byrne and Mike Mignola. So I had reached out to him and was like you, was like, hey, you want to be a guest on the behind the scenes for Krypton or something? And he's like, nah. And so I talked to him about that. And so when Jim and I were interviewing Mike later, I'd mentioned Krypton. And he'd mentioned, he was like, yeah, some guy was talking to me about that. And I was like, yeah, that was me. And he's like, yeah, there was this guy. And I was like, yeah, that was me. So the answer,
I am some guy.
I am that guy. I'm one of the guys. So to the answer to your question, not really, not like Jim did.
So what was your, like, you had these, like, I don't want to say preconceived notions, but you had like what you thought of it, Mike Mignola before.
Yes.
What was your takeaway from after you've finished this documentary? Did you look at him in a different light after hearing the stories of how he touched other people's lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the main surprise for me. And I don't know if Jim has his own, but the one that was like, I knew he was a craftsman. I thought of him as like a Swiss watchmaker, which was like, he's just sitting at his desk and he's making cool things. And that might inspire people, but he wasn't interacting with them directly. And then we just started talking to all these people that have woven in and out of his life. And they were like, oh, you really like him? And they were like, yes. And then he helped me do this. And then he helped me do this. And we talked to people like Michael A. Von Oming and Neil Gaiman. And, you know, next up is Guillermo del Toro. And, you know, everyone has their own stories of how Mike's work has influenced them, but also how their lives are intertwined at one point.
You just mentioned some creators. Those are some of the stretch goals for the interviews, the extra interviews that you guys are adding on.
Those are well, actually, Jim, I'll let you talk about this.
No, I mean, basically, the stretch goals are for the creators we've already interviewed and that we have footage of so that we can do extended interviews. Because, for example, you know, like if you were going to sit and cut our interview right now and actually, like, you know, you might be like, I don't know, like maybe this story was a little boring, or like this is like not 100% relevant to like what we're talking about, so maybe I'll cut it out or whatever. And not that we got any boring stories for sure, but we got stuff where it's like, this is awesome, this is a great anecdote that people would love to hear about, but that's not going to work in the story arc that we are creating inside of the narrative of the documentary. Mm-hmm. So instead, what we're saying is you can hear all those extra bits, those extra stories that were told to us as bonuses on the Blu-ray. They won't affect the main story. And one of the reasons we're on Kickstarter is also to fund, because again, we've been doing this all out of pocket till now, is to fund the next round of filmmaking so that not only can we get more interviews to round out the documentary, but also, you know, hire a professional editor and get a sound mixer and et cetera, so that we can deliver the documentary that we envision will be what we hope, kind of like the ultimate Mike Mignola documentary.
Totally.
And how long do you think? Well, first of all, how long will the documentary be? Do you think when it's done, like the complete one, not with the extras? And how much footage do you already have?
So we have 80 plus hours of footage.
Fuck.
I mean, double that if you count A cam, B cam, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But we have a ton of footage. We have tons of great like stories and anecdotes, and of course, we want it to be a standalone movie. So it's standard movie length. You know, that there's some flex on that. We're still editing it. We'll still be working with editors on it. But like Jim said, there's all these just really interesting anecdotes, but you could really just fall down a rabbit hole if every time someone mentions something that's super cool, but doesn't necessarily affect the main story.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just going to, you know, it costs money to edit those, and it costs money to do the sound design and master those. But as we unlock these stretch goals, we can do these little standalone things that'll just talk about, you know, a really cool comic book or animated show or something from these different creators. And
are all the stretch goals moving forward? You have more, I would imagine, since you have 80 hours of footage. Are they all going to be these anecdotes, or are there other types of stretch goals that you guys have planned?
We have a variety of stretch goals because we want it to be pretty cool for whatever level you back at. So we're trying to be like, okay, this is a cool stretch goal that affects maybe like only the highest level of backing, and that's cool. But like then this next stretch goal is for literally every person on the list. This one's for anybody who's getting the Blu-ray. This is for, you know, blah, blah, blah. So we have, we're trying to balance it, and it's pretty difficult because we also are well ahead of where we had planned on being, and that's a good problem to have. So you're not hearing us complain. It's just, okay, well, we wanted to do this. Oh man, all right, this is done. What's next? Oh, that's done too. What's next? Oh, that's done too. Man, we did not really expect to have this many stretch goals, and that's okay. You know, I'll be the first to admit that, like, I don't feel like we were underprepared, but no one's gonna say like, hey, did you know that you're gonna hit your goal in 3 hours? It's like, nope, that is not. We were hoping to hit our goal, period. But we were like, you know what? I think we could probably hit our goal in the first couple weeks. So let's, you know, what are we gonna do for the last couple weeks?
Yeah.
Not like, well, here's 3 hours.
I mean, I figured it was gonna hit. It was gonna hit fast. I mean, he's got so many fans out there that was a given that thing was gonna get backed. Pretty much, and it did.
Yeah. One of the things I'm very proud about is the first couple goals. So one of the early goals that's included. One of the tiers that's included with a lot of the different pledges were these 2 postcards. And the postcards it's an original piece by Mike Mignola and an original piece by Jason Sean Alexander. And both of those, we filmed them drawing them. And we filmed them in a very like beautiful cinematic style. And the first couple, it's cool. And then we once we hit our goals, we doubled it. So we said, okay, instead of 2 cards, it's 4 cards. And we included Michael A. Von Oming and Duncan Fegredo. And so now everyone's going to get these actual little mini art cards that are actually, you can see them being created in the documentary. So even for people who are maybe not as familiar with Mike, but are fans of drawing and art, I think it's a really cool thing where you get to see these pieces come to life, and then you'll actually have them in hand.
Oh, that's awesome. I fucking love it. You have the shirts. You got. I think I backed one of the tiers. I don't remember. It was over. It's probably like the 3rd up or 4th up. I can't remember because it was hard for me to be like, I don't want to just do the minimum. I really, even though I don't have the money, I'm like, I'll figure it out when the pledge is going to be taken for my card. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where you see like me and Jim as fans like coming through is that we're trying to make stuff that gets us excited than that we would want. And we're like, you know, it'd be cool. You know, we'll often do what's cool before what is, you know, like practical, I guess, because we're going to make the cool thing. We want to make the cool things that we're excited about as fans. And I think that hopefully, I think that kind of shows throughout the campaign and the movie itself.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very anxious to watch. I think is it late 2021 or is it say 2022?
Right now it's April of 2022. I mean,
okay.
To be honest, we hope we can deliver earlier, but you know, we are also still in the middle of a pandemic, and part of what we need to do is travel. You know, so we're up in Seattle. we need to go to the Bay Area, to LA, to New York, a couple other spots. Luckily for now, like we had already gotten our international travel out of the way before the pandemic. And so we have a lot of filming in the US to do, but that's still a fair amount of travel. And we're not at a point where, like, even now, like I still haven't eaten at a restaurant since last April.
Me either, yeah.
You know, like, and so when the time comes, great, you know, we're all over it. But that time is probably not until this fall. And so even though we're backing it right now in March, you know, this will be done basically by the beginning of April, it's going to be probably 5 months before we even start getting more footage. And so for a realistic goal, we were like, we can do this in a year, even if the first 5 months of the year, another 6 months is all we need to get done. If this was not pandemic time, we would say that honestly, we would be able to deliver this by Christmas.
I was gonna say, we're already in, you know, we've been also editing as we go. So as we talk to new people, we, you know, augment and add to different scenes. So, you know, we constantly have like a working draft of the film that we can then kind of like review and then go, you know, it'd be really great as if we got Joe Quesada to talk about this section here and that sort of thing. I almost had a panic. I was like, did we announce Joe Quesada? Okay, yeah, we announced Joe. Okay, good.
You did? I didn't even know. I missed that one. Okay.
He's on our graphic for the Kickstarter of one of the. It was really nice. Like I reached out to Joe and he was very like, because if you look at early Joe Quesada stuff, he is very heavily influenced.
Oh yeah.
And so being able to talk to him and Joe is great because he kind of ticks a few boxes too. Like he's such an awesome person. He's a great interview, but also not only is he coming from an art perspective because he himself is an artist, but he's also coming from like the Marvel perspective where, you know, because he's the EVP and creative director at Marvel. So it's like he can talk about Mike on these levels that not everybody can. He can talk about him as an influence, then as a peer, and then also as what he represents to fans and other creative professionals.
Fuck, I'm excited for that one too, man. You guys are just awesome work. I know I keep saying it, but this is a project that I'm so excited to see, and like I said, it's long overdue to get a project like this about a comic book creator. I think that reading about it's fine, you know, but it's not the same as getting to watch something like you hear it from their mouth, you know, them saying it. I do want to know what has been either the most surprising thing you've learned during this time, or your favorite thing that you've kind of favorite experience moment that's happened during the time that you guys have been working on this.
Maybe TMI, but Michael Avon Oeming has like a third nipple. And actually, it was really cool. Speaking of, I'm joking because I love Mike, but yeah. Mike Oeming, he actually told us a really awesome story about how he ended up. If you read, and I'll get it wrong right now because I don't remember which story arc it was. Like I want to say it might have been in Conqueror Worm.
Conqueror Worm, yeah.
Was it Conqueror Worm? Yeah. So that one of the pilots was named after him. It was like Air Oeming. And so he told us a very cool story that I don't know how many people know about how like it came about for him to be named after the character. And so, or sorry, for the character to be named after him. Yeah. And I think it's those kind of stories that are just, I want to call them a little bit like inside baseball. Like if you're not a big comics fan, you're going to be like, but I am a big comics fan. That's the thing. Like the whole point is that I'm a big comics fan. And so by hearing these stories of like these little origin stories or these little like anecdotes, to me, that's been honestly like the most fun for the project.
Yeah, that was, wow. That was a great story because Oeming was talking about how he was having a hard time with comics. This was before the success of Powers. This was when he was still trying to navigate the place, and he was working as a security guard and was kind of like, I guess I'm done with comics. Comics are this, you know, and he talked to Mignola, and Mignola was just like, what was it? Like, you're German, right? Oming's a German name. And he was like, yeah. And he goes, it's a cool if I name a character after you. And it was just, you know, that's just a little anecdote, but it was just those little things where he was like, that kind of reinvigorated him for comics, or one of the things that reinvigorated him from comics. And then soon after that, we get Powers, and we get all the cool, amazing work that Mr. Oming is still doing. You know, the most surprising one was the Neil Gaiman thing, right?
Yeah.
And so we're talking to Neil Gaiman, and you know, we're big fans, and then on top of that, we do our research. So we already know a lot of stuff, but also we know what interviews to listen to, what books to read, and we try to go in really prepared. And we were talking to Mr. Gaiman, and he was like, well, you know, when I was on the set of Hellboy 2, I helped write the intro for that, you know. So I was working with Guillermo del Toro, and it was kind of a surprise thing. Guillermo said, hey, can you help me on this? And he's like, so it was fun that I got to kind of work on the Hellboy universe. And I was like, oh, we are idiots. I did not know that you helped write Hellboy, you know. And you know, and Neil Gaiman worked for a little bit on a Guillermo del Toro movie. I'm like, I had no idea. I blew it. That was my whole job, and I blew it. And so I was like, oh, I didn't know. And he's like, yeah, no one does. I've never told anyone before. And we're like, oh, cool. Okay. And so, you know, those little things, those little anecdotes, those little stories, and they weave into a bigger tapestry of Mike's life and Mike's creations. But yeah, that's kind of the adventure part of this process in documentary filmmaking and discovery, you know.
I mean, that's pretty much all I got. I mean, I don't want to ruin anything, and I know any other questions I'm going to ask you right now are all going to be selfishly asked just so that I could find out a little bit more or get you guys to drop some bombs on me. I do would love for you guys to share your final thoughts on the project and why people should back it. I mean, it's a given why you should back it. If you're watching this on my channel that is called The Comic Lounge, I only talk about comic books, comic book related stuff. So yeah, just your final thoughts on why people should back this project.
I think it's important to support projects that are independently created. I am a big Kickstarter fan, not only of the platform, but like I have backed literally hundreds of projects. You know, sometimes, most of the time, I'm just doing like the PDF, the lowest level, but every little bit helps. And I think that's, to me, the really awesome part of crowdfunding is that you get 1,000 people to give you $1. That's $1,000 that you didn't have before. Mm-hmm. And we're here because we tried to do as much as we could out of pocket. And at a certain point, it's just not tenable to be able to do that anymore. And so we were like, okay, well, let's find ourselves an avenue to be able to finish this thing that we think is important. And it's not just because we think it's important because we're working on it, because that's like, there's an ego part of that. And there's also a practical part of it. And at the end of the day, for me, it's, the reason I want you to support our Kickstarter is so that we can keep making things that fellow fans, like, because we're basically making this for us. And when I say that we're nobody special, it's because I feel like we are just fans. Mm-hmm. We have a certain set of skills, like Liam Neeson, and we are, and we're connected in some ways that other people aren't. But at the end of the day, I won't be so, because of the pandemic, but every Wednesday I go to the shop. I pick up comics. I'm there. And I think that's who we're making this for, is for us.
That's a great spot to end it. But before I do let you guys go, if you could just share with everybody where we can find the Kickstarter, where we could find you guys to follow you guys and see what else you guys got coming up in the future. And I will drop all those links down below in the comments as well.
Kevin?
Yes. So the best thing is just to go to Kickstarter and just search for Hellboy or Hellboy documentary. We're kind of all over right now, so easy enough to search for. And then I'm talking about film and comics on social media at frogchildren.com. So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at frogchildren.
And for me, make it easy. Everything's under my name. You can find me on Twitter at Jim Demonakos, Instagram, and then for the Mignola documentary, so you can follow it even after the Kickstarter. We have Mignola Doc, so Mignola DOC. That's on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So feel free to check us out. Once again, we would appreciate any and all support on Kickstarter, no matter what level. The more we do, the more we're putting it all into the documentary to make it the best thing we can.
All right, guys, thank you again for taking the time to talk Mignola with me. Thank you guys for doing what you're doing. It's awesome. And everybody listening, watching, go back to fucking Kickstarter as soon as you can. Don't wait till it's, oh, I got time. There's still time left. Fuck that shit. Go back it right now. And I will drop the links down below in the comments for you guys to hit it. And once again, thank you guys. And let's talk again.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Ryan.
Yeah.